She was left to die in the desert until a Lakota cowboy gave her shelter and a second chance. The sun was blazing overhead, its harsh rays beating down on the endless stretch of sand and rocks that seemed to go on forever. The air shimmered with heat, making the horizon blur like a mirage. Every step felt heavier than the last, and each breath she took burned her throat with dryness. She had been walking for hours, maybe even a whole day. She had lost track of time. The desert was vast, empty, and merciless, and she was utterly alone. Her clothes were torn and dusty, sticking to her sunburned skin. Her lips were cracked, and her tongue felt swollen from thirst. Bah. She stumbled over the uneven ground, each step a struggle, her legs weak from fatigue. Her eyes scanned the barren landscape, hoping, wishing for any sign of life. A road, a vehicle, someone, anything. But there was nothing. Only the endless golden sand, scattered rocks, and the occasional twisted shrub that offered no real shade. She wanted to sit down, to rest, but she feared that if she did, she might never rise again. Her mind wandered back to the journey that had brought her here. She had been traveling to start a new life, hoping to leave behind the painful chapters of her past. Life had not been kind to her. She had grown up in a home where love was scarce and harsh words were abundant. When she finally decided to leave, she had thought that freedom meant safety, but the road was crueler than she had imagined. A combination of bad luck, wrong turns, and misjudgments had led her into this desert, and now, as the sun beat down on her, she realized that she had underestimated its power. She tried to remember her plan. There had been a map, a route she had studied countless times, and landmarks she had marked in her mind. But now her memory felt clouded, muddled by heat and fear. Every landmark seemed to look the same in the unending waves of sand. What felt like forever, with the weight of the sun pressing down on her back and the desert stretching endlessly in all directions. It felt like she had no way out, like the earth itself had abandoned her. Her thoughts flickered to her family, the people she had left behind. She didn't want to think about them too much, because those memories were tied to pain and regret. But still, she longed for someone to call her name, to reassure her that she mattered, that she wasn't completely alone in this world. The desert offered no comfort, only silence. The silence was deafening, pressing into her ears, filling her mind with fear. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the temperature rose. Sweat poured down her back, and her skin stung from the unrelenting heat. Her water bottle had long been empty, and she had no way of knowing where the next source of water might be. She tried to ration her strength, telling herself to take small steps, to conserve energy, to keep moving no matter how hard it felt. But each step was more painful than the last, and each glance at the horizon seemed to reveal no escape, only more of the same endless desert. Fear began to creep in. At first it was small, a whisper at the edges of her mind. Then it grew louder, wrapping around her like a heavy cloak. She wondered if anyone would ever find her. She wondered if she was going to survive the day. The desert could be beautiful in its quiet moments, but now it felt like a trap, a place that swallowed people whole and left no trace behind. She wanted to scream, but her voice was hoarse, and no sound came out. Only the wind, which carried no comfort, howled past her ears. Her feet were blistered and bleeding. She stumbled over a loose rock and fell hard onto the sand. Pain shot through her body, but she forced herself to stand. She couldn't stop. She couldn't give in to despair. She remembered the stories she had heard about people lost in deserts, about those who had given up and never been found. She didn't want to be one of those stories. Somehow, She had to survive. Somehow she had to keep going, even though every step felt impossible, even though every breath felt like fire. The desert was not just empty. It was full of challenges she had not anticipated. Sharp rocks cut her skin, and thorny plants scratched her arms and legs. Small animals darted past her, creatures that seemed to thrive in this harsh place, reminding her that life could endure even in the toughest conditions. She wondered if she could be like them, if she could find the strength to endure, to survive against all odds. She took a deep breath, wincing as the hot air burned her lungs, and she forced herself forward. As the day wore on, exhaustion took its toll. She found herself sitting on a large rock, the heat of it burning her skin, but she didn't care. Her body trembled, and her eyelids felt heavy. She thought about giving up, about letting the desert take her, about closing her eyes and drifting into nothingness. But somewhere deep inside, a small spark of determination remained. It was faint, barely noticeable, but it was enough to push her forward, enough to make her take another shaky step, then another, then another. Shadows grew longer as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. The temperature dropped slightly, offering a tiny relief from the relentless heat, but the danger was not gone. The night would bring cold winds, and she had no shelter, no food, no way to protect herself. She knew she had to find help soon, or she would not make it through the night. Her heart pounded with fear and exhaustion, but also with a stubborn refusal to surrender. As she trudged forward, she spotted a faint movement in the distance. At first, she thought it was another mirage, a trick of the heat, but then she realized it was real. A figure appeared, moving across the desert with calm purpose. Her heart leapt with hope and fear. Could it be another traveler? A rescuer? She didn't know, but she forced herself to call out, her voice weak and raspy. "Help, please! Someone!" The figure slowed, turning toward her. Relief and disbelief filled her at the same time. Someone was there. Someone had seen her. The figure rode closer, revealing itself as a man on horseback. He moved with confidence and calm, the kind of presence that made her feel slightly safer, even in this vast, unforgiving desert. Her legs nearly gave out as she stumbled toward him, tears of relief mixing with sweat and dirt on her face. The man dismounted and approached her carefully, his eyes filled with concern. He knelt beside her, offering water and helping her sit. His presence was reassuring, a lifeline in a place that had shown her nothing but danger and despair. He asked her name, listened to her story, and offered gentle words that made her feel a tiny spark of hope she hadn't felt in hours. She realized in that moment that she might just survive this ordeal, that someone had found her, someone who could help her heal, both physically and emotionally. Even as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows grew long across the desert floor, she felt the first flicker of hope. The desert had been cruel, but it had also led her to him. Perhaps this encounter was the beginning of a new chapter, a second chance she didn't yet fully understand. Exhausted, dehydrated, and beaten down, she realized that she was not alone anymore. Someone had come for her, and for the first time in a long time, she believed that survival was possible. She could hardly believe her eyes as the man helped her to her feet. His presence was calm and steady, like the desert itself had somehow chosen him to appear at the exact right moment. He carried himself with quiet confidence, and his gaze was gentle, full of concern without being overwhelming. His name was Thomas, and he was a Lakota cowboy, born and raised on the land that stretched endlessly around them. There was something reassuring about him, something in the way he moved and spoke that made her feel for the first time in hours, or maybe even days, that she could breathe again. Thomas offered her water and she drank greedily, letting the cool liquid soothe her parched throat. Every sip was like a small miracle. Her lips cracked as she tried to form words, but all that came out were broken murmurs. He smiled faintly, understanding, and gently guided her to sit on a large rock nearby while he adjusted his horse and gathered a few supplies he carried. Though the desert had seemed so empty and harsh, she now realized that there was kindness in the world, waiting in unexpected places. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, Thomas assessed her condition. Her arms and legs were scraped from falls and sharp rocks. Her skin burned from the relentless sun, and she was clearly dehydrated and weak. He offered her some simple first aid, using clean water and cloths from his saddlebag to gently clean her wounds. His hands were firm but careful, and she felt a strange mixture of relief and vulnerability. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to accept help without shame or fear. "You're lucky I found you," Thomas said softly, his voice low and steady. "The desert can take a person in a heartbeat if they're not careful." He didn't sound judgmental or harsh, only matter of fact. She nodded, too exhausted to speak, but grateful that he didn't press her for explanations she wasn't ready to give. She realized that she didn't have to justify her struggle or apologize for her mistakes. In this quiet moment, she was simply human, and that was enough. The sky turned shades of orange and pink as the sun began to set, painting the desert in warm, comforting colors that contrasted with the harsh heat of the day. Thomas suggested they find a safe spot to rest for the night. He led her to a small, sheltered area near a cluster of rocks, where the wind was lighter and the ground slightly softer. She struggled to keep up at first, her legs trembling, but he offered his hand to steady her. The simple act of trust, letting someone guide her, felt like a small victory. She realized that the desert had tested her, but now, with Thomas, she had a chance to recover. Once they reached the sheltered spot, Thomas made a small fire. Its warm glow illuminated their surroundings and cast long shadows across the sand. He handed her a small piece of jerky and a few sips of water. It was not much, but to her, it felt like a feast. She hadn't realized how hungry she had been until she took that first bite. He watched her with quiet patience, never rushing her, never asking more than she was willing to give. In that moment, the desert didn't feel so empty anymore. It felt alive, full of possibility, full of hope. As the night settled in, the temperature dropped, and the desert became eerily quiet. The wind rustled softly through the sparse vegetation, and distant sounds of nocturnal animals reminded her that life existed, even in this harsh environment. She shivered slightly, not just from the cool air, but from the weight of everything she had endured that day. Thomas noticed and offered her a blanket he carried, placing it around her shoulders with careful hands. The warmth of the blanket, combined with the calmness of his presence, made her feel almost safe for the first time in days. She wanted to thank him, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she simply nodded, and he understood. He had a way of reading people that went beyond words. "You'll need to rest tonight," he said quietly. "The desert isn't forgiving if you try to push too far in this condition." She wanted to argue, to say she was fine, but her body betrayed her. Her eyes grew heavy, and she realized that sleep was necessary if she wanted to survive. With a small sigh of relief, she leaned back, letting the fire's warmth and Thomas's steady presence lull her toward rest. While she drifted into a light sleep, Thomas kept watch. He had lived in the desert all his life, and he knew its dangers intimately. Coyotes, sudden drops, and unexpected storms could turn a safe place into a deadly one in moments. His eyes scanned the horizon, alert but calm, ready to act if anything threatened her safety. Even in this quiet moment, His experience and care shone through. She would not have survived the day alone, but with him, she had a chance to recover. When dawn broke, painting the desert in soft hues of purple and gold, she awoke feeling slightly stronger than the day before. Thomas had already prepared a small breakfast of simple foods he carried with him. They sat together, eating quietly, the morning sun warming their backs. As she regained her strength, she began to notice more details about him: the calm steadiness in his movements, the patience in his voice, and the gentle way he treated everything around him, from the smallest plant to the horse that followed him faithfully. Slowly she began to talk, telling him a little about herself. She didn't go into all the painful details, only enough to explain how she had ended up in the desert. Thomas listened without interruption, without judgment. His quiet attention made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt for a long time. She realized that trust could be rebuilt, even if only in small steps, and in that small desert clearing, surrounded by the vastness of the land, a fragile bond began to form between them. Over the next few hours, Thomas helped her to her feet again and led her toward a small ranch he owned a few miles away. The journey was slow, but with every step, she felt a little stronger, a little more hopeful. He showed her how to move carefully across the uneven terrain, how to avoid sharp rocks and thorny plants, and how to conserve energy in the harsh sun. It was not just survival. It was a lesson in resilience, patience, and respect for the land. As they walked, Thomas shared stories of his life and his heritage. He spoke of the Lakota people, of traditions passed down through generations, and of the deep connection between his family and the land they lived on. She listened intently, fascinated by the wisdom in his words. There was something grounding about his stories, something that made her feel that, perhaps, life could offer second chances, even in the most unexpected places. By the time they reached the ranch, she was tired but no longer overwhelmed by despair. The sight of the small homestead, with its simple buildings, grazing horses, and open fields, brought a sense of relief she had not known since arriving in the desert. She realized that this place was not just a shelter from the elements. It was a chance to start over, to heal, to rebuild her life with the help of someone who truly cared. Thomas welcomed her into the home with warmth and respect. It was modest, but clean and inviting. He showed her where she could rest, where she could clean herself, and where she could eat. There was no pressure, no questions beyond what she was ready to share. The simplicity and care of his actions made her feel safe, as if the weight of the desert and the trauma she had endured could finally begin to lift. In the days that followed, she started to recover both physically and emotionally. Thomas taught her small tasks around the ranch, gave her advice on caring for herself, and shared his knowledge of the land. Each day she felt a little stronger, a little more capable, a little more alive. The bond between them grew, built on trust, kindness, and the understanding that sometimes people appear in our lives just when we need them most. By the end of the first week, she could walk without fear, tend to small chores, and even ride a horse under Thomas's guidance. She laughed again, a sound that had been absent for far too long, and every night as the sun set over the desert, she felt a quiet gratitude for the man who had found her, cared for her, and offered her a second chance. The desert, once a place of fear and despair, now held a memory of hope, a hope that she could survive, that she could heal, and that she could find strength she never knew she had. The ranch was small but welcoming, nestled in a quiet valley where the desert met rolling grasslands. The wind carried the faint scent of dry earth and wild flowers, and the soft sounds of animals stirred in the early morning. For her, it was a world entirely different from the harsh desert where she had been left to struggle. Every corner of the ranch seemed alive, yet peaceful, and for the first time in a long while she felt a sense of safety settling over her. Thomas led her inside, showing her a modest room with a bed, clean sheets, and a small window that looked out over the open plains. "Rest here for now," he said gently. "We'll take things slowly. There's no rush." She nodded, still overwhelmed by the kindness he had shown her and by the fact that she had survived the desert at all. She had thought her life had ended in those empty sands, but here she was, alive, with someone who cared enough to save her. The days that followed were quiet, filled with simple routines that slowly helped her body and mind heal. Thomas taught her how to care for herself in small ways, how to keep clean, how to eat properly to regain strength, and how to conserve her energy while still moving through the chores that came naturally on a ranch. She learned to tend to the horses, brushing their coats, feeding them, and learning the subtle signals they gave to communicate. She found the work surprisingly calming, each task giving her small victories that built her confidence. At first, she struggled to trust fully, to let go of the fear and hesitation that had stayed with her for so long. Every small sound outside, the rustle of a branch, the whinny of a horse, made her flinch, as if danger lurked in every corner. Thomas noticed and never pushed her. Instead, he encouraged her gently, showing her how the world could be safe when treated with care and respect. "The land listens," he said one day as they walked together across the fields. "If you move with it, it will guide you. If you fight against it, it will remind you of its power. But it is never cruel without reason."
His words, simple and steady, struck a chord in her.
She began to see that survival wasn't just about physical strength. It was about patience, observation, and respect for life around her. The evenings were her favorite time, as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in oranges, pinks, and purples. She and Thomas would sit outside, sharing quiet moments. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they simply watched the horizon, listening to the soft whisper of the wind. Thomas told stories of his childhood, of the Lakota people, and the traditions passed down through generations. He spoke of resilience, of hope, and of the importance of community and family. She listened intently, absorbing not just the words, but the sense of calm and strength that seemed to radiate from him. Slowly, she began to open up about herself as well, sharing pieces of her past in small, cautious steps. She told Thomas about the struggles she had faced, the decisions that had led her into the desert, and the fear that had accompanied her for so long. He listened without interruption, without judgment, nodding in understanding and offering quiet support. For the first time in years, she felt that someone truly understood her. Someone who didn't need her to explain everything perfectly. She realized that trust could grow slowly, like a seed pushing through the soil, and that sometimes the most important thing was simply being present for someone else. Life on the ranch was not just about survival, it was about discovery. She found that she enjoyed the rhythm of the work, the way each day had its tasks and responsibilities. She learned how to mend fences, gather water, and care for the small garden that Thomas tended. The physical activity combined with the fresh air and open skies seemed to lift some of the weight that had pressed on her chest for so long. With each passing day, her body grew stronger, and her spirit felt a little lighter. One afternoon, as she helped Thomas guide the horses back to their stable, she stumbled and fell into the soft sand. Thomas was immediately at her side, helping her up with a kind smile. "It's all right," he said gently. "You're learning. You'll get stronger every day." In that moment, she realized that she didn't have to be perfect, didn't have to rush. Healing was a process, and every mistake, every fall, was part of learning to live again. The reassurance in his voice made her feel more capable than she had in a long time. The small successes began to accumulate. She started waking up earlier, feeling eager to see what each day might bring. She discovered a sense of pride in helping with the ranch work, in learning skills that were unfamiliar but deeply rewarding. Thomas encouraged her to try new things, never forcing her, but always showing her patience and understanding. With his guidance, she began to feel that she could navigate life outside of fear and desperation, that the future could hold opportunities she had never imagined. Food became another source of comfort. Thomas taught her how to cook simple meals using ingredients from the ranch and nearby land. She learned to make bread, prepare vegetables, and even catch and cook fish from the small stream that ran close by. Each meal was a reminder that she could care for herself, that she could create stability and warmth, even in a place that once seemed so inhospitable. Preparing food became a meditative task, a way to reconnect with her body and her senses. But it wasn't just physical healing that took place on the ranch. Emotional healing was happening too, slowly and quietly. She found herself laughing again, a sound that had been missing for far too long. She began to trust that her past mistakes didn't have to define her, that she could take each day as a new beginning. Thomas's steady presence was a constant reminder that not all people were harsh or uncaring, that kindness could be real and sustaining. She began to see herself as someone capable of more than just surviving, someone capable of living. Evenings became a time of reflection. As they sat by the fire, watching the stars emerge one by one, she started to feel a deep sense of peace. The desert no longer felt threatening. It was part of the land she now knew, part of the journey that had led her to this place. She realized that life was not about perfection or control, but about resilience, patience, and openness to the unexpected. The quiet moments with Thomas, sharing stories, tasks, and simple companionship, helped her understand that healing was not just about fixing what was broken, but about learning to trust life again. Over time, she began to feel a connection to the land itself. She noticed the small signs of life around her, the tracks of animals, the way plants bent toward the sun, the rhythm of the wind across the plains. Thomas encouraged her to observe, to learn from the land, to understand its rhythms and patterns. She discovered a sense of wonder in these small details, a feeling of belonging she had never experienced before. The desert, once a place of despair, had transformed into a teacher, showing her resilience, patience, and the beauty of life in even the harshest conditions. One morning, as she and Thomas tended to the horses, he paused and looked at her with a thoughtful expression. "You've come a long way," he said. "Not just in body, but in spirit, too. You're stronger than you think." She felt a swell of emotion, a mix of pride, gratitude, and hope. It was a recognition of her growth, of the journey she had endured, and the possibilities that lay ahead. For the first time, she truly believed that she could face whatever challenges might come her way. By the end of her first month at the ranch, she had grown into a rhythm of life that felt both challenging and rewarding. She was no longer the frightened, exhausted woman who had wandered alone in the desert. She was learning, healing, and growing stronger each day. The bond between her and Thomas had deepened, rooted in trust, respect, and shared experience. And as she looked out over the open plains, the sun rising over the horizon, she realized that she had been given something far more valuable than mere survival. She had been given a chance to live, fully and freely, in a world that she once believed had abandoned her. As weeks turned into months, she began to feel a sense of belonging that she had never known before. Life on the ranch was no longer a challenge of mere survival. It was becoming a life filled with purpose, routine, and quiet satisfaction. Each day brought new tasks, new lessons, and new opportunities to grow stronger and more confident. She no longer thought of herself as the helpless woman left alone in the desert. Instead, she started to see herself as someone capable, resilient, and full of potential. Thomas continued to guide her, but he also gave her space to learn on her own. He taught her how to ride the horses more skillfully, how to handle the cattle, and how to manage the small farm that supplied vegetables and grains. At first, she had been clumsy and unsure, afraid of making mistakes. But with patience and practice, she began to master the tasks. Every success, no matter how small, brought her a quiet joy that she had long forgotten. She felt a sense of pride in herself for the first time in years, and that pride gave her courage to try more, to push beyond her comfort zones. One day, while working in the fields, she paused to look out over the wide-open plains. The sun shone warmly on her face, the wind carried the scent of wildflowers and earth, and the horses grazed peacefully nearby. She realized that she had begun to feel at peace with the world again. The desert, which had once seemed so threatening and endless, now felt like a distant memory, a chapter of her life she had survived but no longer had to fear. She smiled, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time, she felt free. The bond between her and Thomas grew stronger with each passing day. They shared quiet moments together, sometimes working side by side on chores, sometimes sitting by the fire in the evenings, talking about life, family, and the future. Thomas taught her about the Lakota traditions, about respect for nature, and the importance of living in harmony with the land. She listened with fascination, learning not just the skills for survival, but lessons about resilience, patience, and compassion. She found herself drawn not only to the knowledge he shared, but to his gentle, steady presence. Her confidence grew as she took on more responsibilities. She learned to plan her day, to manage small tasks without constant guidance, and even to help care for Thomas's horses and livestock on her own. Each success gave her a sense of empowerment she had never known before. She began to trust herself, to rely on her own instincts and abilities. The transformation was gradual, but undeniable. She had gone from a frightened woman, uncertain of her next step, to someone capable of making decisions, solving problems, and contributing meaningfully to the ranch and its daily life. One afternoon, while helping Thomas mend a fence, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction in the work they were doing together. Their hands moved in sync, and she realized that she had learned not only the skills of ranch life, but also the quiet power of collaboration and trust. Working alongside him, she felt supported and respected, and in return, she gave her best effort. The rhythm of the work, the shared focus, and the mutual respect strengthened their bond in ways that words alone could not describe. Her healing extended beyond the physical and practical tasks of ranch life. Emotionally, she felt lighter, freer, and more capable of connecting with others. Thomas encouraged her to participate in the small local community, attending gatherings, helping neighbors with chores, and sharing her story when she felt ready. Each interaction strengthened her confidence and reminded her that kindness and friendship existed outside the walls of the ranch. She began to see herself not just as someone saved, but as someone who could contribute, support, and even inspire others. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in warm shades of orange and purple, she and Thomas sat quietly on a hill overlooking the plains. The horses grazed in the distance, and the gentle wind whispered through the grasses. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life she was building, for the lessons she had learned, and for the man who had given her the chance to begin again. "I never imagined life could be like this," she admitted softly. Thomas nodded, his eyes calm and understanding. "Sometimes the hardest paths lead to the places we were meant to be," he said. With each passing day, she embraced more aspects of life on the ranch. She learned to cook for them both, preparing meals with fresh vegetables from their small garden and the occasional meat Thomas hunted or bought. She learned to care for the land, planting seeds, tending to the soil, and watching life grow under her care. These small acts, simple as they seemed, gave her a sense of purpose and stability. They reminded her that life could be nurturing, not just harsh and unforgiving, as she had once believed. Her bond with Thomas deepened into something beyond friendship, though neither of them rushed to define it. There was a quiet understanding between them, a mutual respect and care that grew stronger each day. She found herself thinking less about the pain of her past and more about the possibilities of the future. She felt safe, valued, and respected, a feeling she had not known for most of her life. Over time, she began to notice changes in herself. She was stronger physically, her skin had regained a healthy glow, and her muscles had toned from the daily labor of ranch life. She was also stronger emotionally, able to face challenges with patience and resilience. Her fears had not disappeared completely, but they had diminished, replaced by confidence, hope, and a sense of agency. She no longer felt like a victim of circumstance. She felt like a woman who had endured, survived, and now thrived. One afternoon, while checking on the cattle, she had a moment of quiet reflection. She thought about how far she had come, from the desperate woman lost in the desert to someone capable of working alongside Thomas, caring for the animals, and managing tasks on the ranch. The contrast was overwhelming, yet empowering. She realized that she had not only been given a second chance, but that she had embraced it fully, working with determination and patience to rebuild her life. Her growing confidence and strength extended into her interactions with others. She began forming bonds with neighbors and local families, helping with community tasks, sharing stories, and learning from others' experiences. She realized that her life had expanded beyond the confines of the ranch and the desert, that she could connect with people without fear or hesitation, and that the world offered opportunities for kindness and support if she was willing to accept them. Even in quiet moments, she found herself reflecting on the lessons of her past, the journey she had endured, and the life she was now building. She understood that life was unpredictable and sometimes harsh, but it also held moments of beauty, compassion, and growth. She had learned to balance caution with courage, patience with action, and vulnerability with trust. Each day on the ranch reinforced these lessons, allowing her to grow into the person she had always hoped to become. By the time several months had passed, she had fully integrated into the rhythm of ranch life. She was no longer the frightened woman who had wandered the desert. She was a strong, capable, and independent woman who had learned to trust herself, the land, and the people around her. Thomas continued to guide her, but she had reached a point where she could navigate life confidently, with determination and grace. As the sun set one evening, casting long shadows across the open plains, she felt a profound sense of peace. She knew that her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. The desert, once a place of fear and despair, was now a distant memory, replaced by hope, resilience, and the promise of a future she could shape. She looked at Thomas and smiled, grateful not just for the life he had helped her save, but for the chance to live fully, to love, to work, and to thrive. The bond between them had grown into something unspoken, but deeply meaningful. It was a relationship built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. She had been rescued, yes, but she had also discovered her own strength, resilience, and capacity for growth. The life they shared on the ranch was not just about survival. It was about living, learning, and embracing the possibilities that each day offered. And in that moment, looking out over the golden plains, she knew with certainty that she had found not only safety and care, but a place to call home, a place where she could heal, grow, and live the life she had always dreamed of. She had been given a second chance, and she had embraced it with courage, hope, and an open heart. Months had passed since she had first stumbled into the desert, exhausted, dehydrated, and afraid. The memory of that endless sand and scorching sun still lingered in her mind. but it no longer held the same power over her. She had survived, and more than that, she had grown. Her body was strong, her spirit resilient, and her heart open to the possibilities of life. The ranch had become more than a shelter. It was a home, a place of safety, and a space where she could fully embrace who she was meant to be. Her mornings now began with purpose and energy. She would rise with the sun, feeling the warmth on her face as she stepped outside, breathing in the fresh, clean air of the open plains. The animals greeted her as if she belonged. Horses nuzzled her hand, the chickens clucked softly in the coop, and even the dogs wagged their tails as she passed. She had learned their rhythms, understood their needs, and in caring for them, she discovered a new kind of joy. The simple acts of feeding, grooming, and tending to the land became rituals of healing and gratitude, grounding her in a life she once thought impossible. Thomas was always there, but he no longer needed to guide her through every step. She could manage the daily tasks of the ranch on her own, though he offered help when needed and wisdom when asked. Their partnership had evolved into something natural, a silent understanding that went beyond words. She respected him deeply, and he respected her independence. They worked side by side, each supporting the other, sharing the burdens and the joys of the land. Their bond was quiet but strong, built on mutual trust, care, and the shared experiences that had brought them together. The sense of accomplishment in her life grew each day. She began taking on responsibilities she would have once thought impossible, planning the day's work, managing the small farm, and even helping neighbors with tasks they could not handle alone. She felt useful, capable, and valued. The self-doubt that had haunted her for years was slowly replaced by confidence and determination. She realized that the desert had not broken her, it had only made her stronger. The hardships she had faced had prepared her for a life of resilience, gratitude, and purpose. As the seasons changed, she noticed the subtle beauty of the land around her. The harsh desert heat gave way to cooler winds, and wildflowers began to bloom across the plains. Birds sang from the trees, and the streams sparkled in the sunlight. She took walks with Thomas, learning the signs of the land, understanding how to read the weather, and noticing the intricate balance of nature. Each step she took was a reminder that life continued, even after pain and hardship. She felt connected to the world in a way she had never experienced before. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, she sat quietly on the porch, watching the sky transform into shades of orange and purple. Thomas joined her, handing her a cup of tea. They sat in silence for a while, simply enjoying the moment. She felt a deep sense of peace settle over her, a feeling that life had finally given her what she needed: safety, stability, and the chance to heal. She turned to Thomas, her eyes reflecting gratitude and quiet joy. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for saving me, for teaching me, for giving me a second chance." Thomas smiled, his eyes calm and steady. "You've earned it," he replied. "You've worked hard, faced your fears, and grown stronger than you realize. I only helped you see what was already there." His words touched her deeply. She realized that her journey had never truly been about someone else saving her. It had been about finding her own strength, and Thomas had simply guided her toward it. She had discovered her own resilience, and now she could fully embrace her life. With her newfound confidence, she began exploring more of the surrounding area. She walked along the hills, exploring hidden valleys and streams, marveling at the beauty she had once thought unreachable. Each day brought a sense of freedom, a feeling that the world was full of possibilities. She realized that she could build a life of her own choosing, one filled with purpose, connection, and joy. The fear and despair that had once dominated her thoughts were replaced by hope, gratitude and determination. Her relationships with the local community also grew stronger. Neighbors who had been curious about the woman who had appeared in the desert began to see her as a valued member of the area. She helped with small tasks, shared meals, and offered support when needed. Each interaction reinforced her sense of belonging, reminding her that life was richer when shared with others. She felt part of something larger than herself, connected to both the land and the people around her. The bond with Thomas continued to deepen. It was no longer simply about survival or guidance. It was about partnership, understanding, and shared life. They laughed together, worked together, and supported one another in ways that required no words. She had come to trust him fully, knowing that he would always act with kindness and integrity. In turn, he trusted her, respecting her independence and her strength. Their relationship was a quiet but powerful testament to the healing that kindness, trust, and shared experiences could bring. One crisp morning, she helped Thomas repair a section of fence that had been damaged by a recent storm. They worked together efficiently, side by side, moving with a rhythm that spoke of familiarity and trust. As they finished, she looked over the land they had nurtured, feeling proud of what they had accomplished. The ranch was more than a place to live. It was a symbol of resilience, healing, and new beginnings. She realized that the life she had built was not just a second chance. It was a life filled with her own hands. Over time, she also found moments to reflect on her journey. She thought about the desert, about the fear and despair she had felt, and about the man who had appeared when she needed help most. She realized that those experiences had shaped her in ways she could never have anticipated. The desert had tested her, pushed her to her limits, and shown her both her vulnerabilities and her strength. And Thomas had been there not to save her from herself, but to help her see what she was capable of achieving. As the days continued, she embraced the rhythm of life on the ranch fully. She woke with the sun, worked with the animals, tended to the land, and spent quiet evenings with Thomas. Each day felt purposeful and meaningful. She had learned patience, resilience, and the importance of trust, not just in others, but in herself. She had learned to embrace life fully, to find joy in small moments, and to appreciate the beauty of the world around her. Her life had transformed completely from the day she had wandered alone in the desert. She was no longer a woman defined by fear, loss, or despair. She was a woman defined by strength, courage, and the ability to embrace second chances. The desert that had once seemed like the end of her world was now a distant memory, replaced by the warmth of the ranch, the steady presence of Thomas, and the promise of a future she could build for herself. One evening, as the stars began to twinkle in the clear night sky, she sat beside Thomas on the porch. The quiet of the night surrounded them, filled with the soft sounds of animals and the gentle rustle of the wind through the grasses. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for her survival, but for the life she had built, the person she had become, and the love and trust that now filled her days. She knew that she had been given a true second chance, and she was determined to live it fully. In the weeks and months that followed, her confidence and independence continued to grow. She managed more of the ranch on her own, took initiative in caring for the animals and land, and even began mentoring others who visited the ranch for guidance or help. She discovered a deep sense of fulfillment in sharing her knowledge, her experiences, and her story. She realized that her journey from despair to hope could inspire others to find strength in their own lives. And through it all, Thomas remained by her side, not as a savior, but as a partner, friend, and trusted companion. Their bond had evolved into something deeper than either of them could have anticipated. It was a bond built on respect, shared experiences, and the understanding that life's true value was found in trust compassion, and the courage to embrace new beginnings. Together, they had built more than a ranch. They had built a life full of hope, resilience, and love. Finally, one morning, as the sun rose over the plains, painting the sky in warm shades of gold, she stood at the edge of the ranch, looking out over the land that had become her home. She breathed deeply, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and the gentle breeze at her back. For the first time in her life, she felt completely at peace. She had survived the desert, healed her body and spirit, built a life full of purpose, and found trust and connection once again. She had been given a second chance, and she had embraced it with courage, hope, and an open heart.